Hi, I'm Aston.
Hi, I'm Gemma.
We are
Celestial
Celestial
Entertainment.
Entertainment. We normally are musicians, singers, dancers, actors, clowns,
Clowns.
comedians.
Bit of everything. Entertainment, basically.
Yes, and you can normally find us on twitch.tv.
/ Celestial Entertainment NZ.
But we have decided to change tack a little bit because I don't know if you know what's going on in New Zealand, but our government are rolling out new vaccine mandates like they changed their underwear. And this week we were announced that we can no longer work as entertainers
If
without
we
a
don't get
vaccine.
vaccinated, sorry.
But this was also very fitting in that I was having a conversation with Nick yesterday in response to it, saying, like, what can we do? Is there anything we can do? And he said, well, actually, there's the New Zealand Declaration of Independence, or He Whakaputanga. And
The anniversary is
today
today.
is the anniversary that it was signed in 1835, also by my great 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 grandfather, and amongst a number of very powerful rangatira or chiefs, Māori chiefs, and the it basically the apparently the Declaration of Independence handed the government the right to rule our people, and now that the government's not necessarily acting in the best interest of all of us, there is a possibility that this piece of legislation can also take that ruling back off the government. So we thought it was a very fitting time to have this conversation and decided to whack this show out. Thank you for joining us. We have Nick today and Isaac. Nick and Isaac both are part of Team Earthbeat, and friends of ours or mine. And we were inspired to do this because we had a conversation yesterday. I'm sure everyone's talking about what's going on, and all these every new day, new mandate kind of becomes a thing.
New day, more people feeling pressured to get a vaccine.
More unemployed,
More
beneficiaries. Our government seems to want people to do nothing and not work. And I don't know, be a bit of a slave to them. So it's quite interesting. But in particular, what I was really interested in, Nick, is this your legal expertise, and your position on, where is there something we like, is this legal? First and foremost, is the government actually able to just roll out these mandates, and are they law just because they say, oh, new mandate, must be vaccinated to work in hospitality?
Well, I mean, there are challenges underway in the courts, as you're aware, about a number of these things. And it is a significant jump from a legal perspective when you move from making something available to making something required. It certainly strays into the area of being a prima facie breach of the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act and the Human Rights Act as well, when you're essentially coercing people into accepting medical treatment by saying, if you don't, then you're going to lose your job. And it probably comes down to the question, the test in the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act about whether the mandates in question are demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. And that test is going to apply differently to different situations. So, for example, one of the early mandates that came in border control, where it was considered that this was like a significant potential risk of this is where COVID will get in, when we were still adopting an elimination strategy, and not many people were up in arms saying it should be mandatory that people involved in border control and frontline response ought to be vaccinated. But the new kind of overlay of information coming in suggests that despite early hopes that it would be otherwise, that vaccination doesn't have a significant statistical impact upon transmission, that you can be fully vaccinated and still catch the disease and still pass it on to others. And so the demonstrable justification for mandates gets undermined significantly by that, because if it's not prophylactic, if it's not preventing transmission, then really mandating it, the whole basis of mandating it sort of sinks below the water. So it's very much a watch this space situation going on at the moment. And recently, these arguments were presented to the High Court down in Wellington. With Sue Gray has brought proceedings down there. And although I haven't been involved in those proceedings, I've been keeping my eye on updates from it. It sounds like she's been presenting all the relevant arguments and available evidence. And we're waiting on a decision from the court. And I'm, for one, I'm hopeful that the court is going to make some relatively firm pronouncements about legality of what's going on. So, I mean, that's an overview of the situation from a legal perspective.
Do you that judge justice? How do you, like? I know we talked about this yesterday, and you kind of said it sets precedent for going forward this particular case, even though it's just representing 4 people, and Sue has indicated that she's going to then do a much larger case, which is essentially the people versus the Crown. But what were you meaning when you were stating that this sets precedent?
So the way precedent works in New Zealand is that when a court issues a decision, then all lower courts have to follow that decision, whatever the reasoning is, whatever the principles that are laid down. Courts at the same level. So if the High Court issues a decision, then that sets a precedent, which doesn't have to be followed though by other High Court judges. The same issues can arise in another case, and another High Court judge could say, "No, I take a different view, and I don't regard this as a sound precedent." And that actually happens all of the time. So what you really need in order to establish a firm precedent is a Court of Appeal, or even better, a Supreme Court, which is the highest court in New Zealand, to issue legal pronouncements. And I've got no doubt that that's going to happen in this case. These issues, because they're so crucial, will go up to the highest courts, will go up to the Court of Appeal and then the Supreme Court to determine what the legal principles are. And that was done, I don't know if you recall, back in the first lockdowns, that lawyers brought proceedings then arguing that the lockdowns were unlawful. And that went to the High Court, and the High Court issued a decision saying, yes, they were. They weren't. They put the cart before the horse in terms of the legal authority to do what they did. But then they said, but it's kind of okay. It was kind of an emergency, and you know, this time, and by that time the lockdowns were over anyway. So the court said, well, it's kind of a matter of legal theory more than anything else. But here's what they got wrong. And essentially, the reason is you can't use orders in council or regulations to override the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act, basically, because the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act is legislation, and you can't override or fail to follow legislation in orders of council or regulations, which are subordinate legislation. They're not done through Parliament. They might be done through the Department of Health, or they might be done through a select committee or a lesser process. So the way the law works is that if you're issuing an order in council or regulation, which a lot of these mandates will be, you can't do so in a manner that breaches primary legislation unless you're specifically authorised to do so under another set of primary legislation. So Parliament can issue legislation, or can create a new act saying you're entitled to do vaccine mandates, for example. And Parliament can make any laws it wants to. It doesn't have to be consistent with the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. It can explicitly say New Zealand Bill of Rights Act doesn't apply in this circumstance. But where that happens, there's got to be a report done by the Attorney General saying we're aware that we're breaching the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act and we're doing it anyway for these reasons, and it's got to be justified. So it's a kind of a long-winded way of saying that the challenges that are happening already will have some effect. If they're positive, they'll require, but what they'll probably do is push the government back into signing specific legislation saying overriding the case, basically. And that's what they did in the foreshore and seabed case. That's why we have the foreshore and seabed legislation, because the court said the Crown's in the wrong, and the Crown said, okay, well, we'll pass legislation saying we're in the right. So
it's kind of like what they're doing.
Wow.
It's kind of like what they're doing now, right? Like,
yeah,
mandates, and 2 days later or however long, like, here's a bill.
Yeah. So that's the thing. I mean, the Crown owns the game in the end. That the government owns the game in the sense that if it's got the sufficient numbers, it can pass whatever legislation it wants to require whatever breach of human rights is involved to be legalized. But it doesn't want to do that because it puts it in the headlights of saying we admit we're breaching human rights. They'd rather go, no, it's a grey area. We think it's justified. We're just going to do it through these little actions here, and hopefully we'll get away with it. Or by the time someone catches us at it, it's all irrelevant anyway because we've got through the emergency or whatever. And it's pretty Mickey Mouse, but that's generally the way the Crown operates.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Lots of faith.
So inspiring.
Yeah, I know. There's a saying saying if you want to eat sausages or respect the law, don't watch the making of either of them.
I have seen the making of a sausage, and yeah. Never again.
I'm sure we can.
I'll still eat them though.
I think it's a good analogy to
It's a great
government.
analogy.
Governments.
Mostly it's
sausage construction.
Mostly it's a bunch of guys sitting around a room saying, "Do you think we can get away with this?" Yeah, probably.
Isaac, have you any thoughts from coming from Israel, where you've got the government's very different over there, right? To our government.
There is a male prime minister, so yeah, it is different than the female prime minister we have. In gender, they are different, but I think one of the things that actually I reflected when I came to New Zealand in 2003, one of the major reasons why a few of us and many other people in Israel wanted something different was how in the early 90s, leading basically since then until now, the toxicity and the narrative of divisiveness that came from top officials, whether it's prime ministers at the time, members of parliament, it was so toxic that it basically not only divided people in Israel and almost caused for war between Israelis, based at the time on political agenda. So to be honest, it's irrelevant what is the cause. Could be COVID, could be Muslim, could be Jew, could be whatever. But the narrative of the story is exactly the same. And so I obviously came to New Zealand in 2003, thinking how brilliant that place is, and realizing today that is no difference than any other place. People are exactly the same. And whenever we confront an issue and a challenge, you actually realize another side of human being that is not amazing to be part of, because I feel like in challenging times, that's where you actually measure the depth of a human being to hold themselves in a challenging time. When everything is great, it's great, right? I don't need friends when I'm all happy and wonderful. They can come if they feel like it. But when it's a challenging time, that's when I see people for their capability and capacity to hold a space like that. And to be honest, I'm not surprised, but at the same time, I'm extremely disappointed to see the amount of divisiveness and anger and disbelief and suppression that the government in New Zealand are using words that puts me off 20 years ago to leave Israel. And I'm thinking now, they're actually doing exactly the same thing, only worse, because this time it applies to everyone and not just group of people. And when you check people and you walk in the streets and you see people taking their children and moving to the other side, if I walk, for example, I feel it reminds me the first time I went to Jerusalem with my dad, I was 13. And I remember walking in some parts of Jerusalem, whether it was the Muslim quarter or the Jewish quarter. And whenever a Muslim would walk past, a Jewish family would take their kids and go to the other side. And I was like, what is this? Why people are doing that? And then you realize the ease of obedience and fear tactics, you can actually transform a nation like Germany to exterminate people just for the sake of doing their job or following orders, or they've been told to do so, they've been told to be feared of Jewish people or Muslim people. And I know it's a bit of a harsh potentially example, but it's exactly the same. The narrative in which New Zealand government is using is as dangerous as previous experiences in history. And if people have access to history, they can teach us everything, because everything is repeatable. Nothing is new. I'm not surprised by any of that. It's not something new. It's new to Kiwis, but it's not new anywhere else. So it's another good thing about New Zealand, to be really innocent, naive. It's great, but at the same time, I feel there is not enough depth for people to really realize, one, connect to your gut feeling. And surely some people, most of us, can feel something is not quite right. But when you basically operate in this level of your mind, it's the easiest way to control people. When you start bringing your intuition back, like animals, then we can actually feel into different layers of really realizing, is it okay for me to abuse someone that is, for example, unvaccinated? Is it okay for me to be really angry about blaming a group of people and not, for example, my government? Or, for example, blaming, I don't know, COVID for doing that, and not someone that doesn't want to have a vaccine or want to have a vaccine, because it's irrelevant what choice you make in that case. So it's basically raises a lot of questions, but really for us, you know, when we do like community events with strong value proposition of why we do that, for me now it just becomes more clear that we're going to be the glue, if possible, between those kind of camps of stuff, as if it's needed, because ultimately everyone has the same fear and concerns and wishes as everyone else, whether you want to be vaccinated or whether you don't want to be vaccinated. The fear of it's, they actually share a lot more than what they think. Unfortunately, the government makes you realize that you don't share a lot. And that's what actually raises not only concerns, it requires some action and voicing that, because I feel New Zealand government, especially Jacinda Ardern, became so complacent and as if ego tripping about the mass sort of popularity that she got, unlike ever before in New Zealand elections or in New Zealand and around the world. And with all the respect, people are people, power gets to people sometimes. And I feel that is the case this time as well. When I hear words of really condescending and treating people like really little kids or I feel I'm almost I am like in a school teacher class, and I'm asking permission maybe to do this or that. This one is beating me up because he's doing that and I'm not. And it's just and it's fueled by my teacher. So it raises a lot of questions of how we can actually, one, hold government accountable for this, and then to come out, they can still come out strong and say, hey guys, we're aware of this, we respect these people and sides and things like that, and this is what we can offer to actually acknowledge that. It doesn't seem to be the narrative now, but as soon as people are going to start voicing and do that in a way in which is constructive as well, rather than pointing out and blaming, because it's feeding the same fear. So it's irrelevant to do that. It won't go anywhere. So I'm interested to see more how we can actually, rather than blaming, one, co-create alternative to this, but also be firm and stand to not human freedom, I would say, because, I'm personally not anti-vax, I'm pro-science, and a valid science that based on real data. And when I say real data, in times like that, it's such a complex thing that even the top scientists are really disagree about different things. So when I see an MD professor in Harvard University that yesterday was so likable and amazing, and now is crazy because he thinks this and that, it raises a lot of questions about what is actually leading these obviously agendas or these laws or rules and things like that. And it doesn't feel really pure case of just wanting to make sure that everyone is fine and amazing. So for me, if it's the biggest crisis of humanity and you allow yourself in New York, for example, to fire 1,400 health officials, which is about 20% of the health workers in New York, because they haven't had vaccine, I don't know, in times of really the most biggest crisis in health and humanity, you go ahead with anything. You make sure that the only people that can provide care and health are still doing that. It's like in time of war. You're not getting rid of your doctor in times of war because he didn't want to do something. You need them for the war at the moment. Then you can deal with the stuff later. So there is lots of questions. And then when I check New Zealand government adopting, like in Israel, by the way, Israel, if you read Israel mainstream media, they call it, in Israel mainstream media, imagine the New Zealand Herald in New Zealand, will admittingly saying that we are an experiment ground for Pfizer. Now, as soon as you say that in New Zealand, you get blamed, you conspiracy theorists, you crazy.
So bad.
Israel mainstream media uses these words to describe, and they call it Israel is the biggest laboratory of Pfizer, because Israel was the first nation to receive Pfizer vaccine. And when I read the contract between Israel and Pfizer, and by the way, it's advertised in the New York Times, 30 contracts between Pfizer and different governments around the world, it's so disturbing, and it's calling for just like, I just opposing this vaccine because they're just not really representing that humanitarian support bullshit that everyone was telling us a year ago, right? It's all of us together, let's pull together. And some company, not only intellectual property, not allowing country like, say, India, to use that for that amazing humanitarian support in the claim that they actually need to make money as a result of it. You ask yourself, is it everything based on that? Is it even today in 2021, the most amazing, incredible event that we've ever had, humanitarian crisis, but the capitalism train still drives through that? I'm like, I just don't connect with that. And if it was for the sake of people, it was possibly slightly different than how it's actually done now. And so I'm not surprised that why New Zealand government are just pushing Pfizer vaccine. New Zealand government, Jacinda Ardern, can easily say, hey guys, I hear the ones that are concerned about this technology, for example. There is other options in the market at the moment. In fact, MedSafe in New Zealand approved 4 different vaccines.
Yeah, I heard at least.
So why not to offer
and I didn't even realize
an
that.
option, right? Hey guys, we heard you. There you go. There is an option for the ones that are a bit kind of feeling a bit unwell about getting this or that. But that's not the narrative that is playing. So to be honest, in this time of age, I won't surprise by anything. I won't surprise if people got some incentives for that. And by the way, don't quote me that I'm suggesting that New Zealand government gets any incentive from that, but I won't be surprised, because when you actually push an agenda in a way as if there is nothing else exists out there, and every second person falls down, becomes a zombie, then I believe I would be as well going to just take the vaccine. And then when I hear talks like you danger to others, that was 6 months ago. I kept all these articles because I was really interested as an avid history lover that always wanted to find out how Germany became Nazi. And I actually realized
we're getting a demonstration of that.
Yeah. So 6 months ago, Jacinda used to say that we are danger to other people whomever didn't get the vaccine. Now the words change from danger to less safe. All right. So you're less safe to other people, but the danger that they've used 6 months ago already penetrated people. So it's really smart the way things are obviously moving and evolving, and only people that can notice that, and they have previous experiences. Unfortunately, in Israel, we have lots of experience in crap like that. So I noticed these things. And then when you say that, yeah, it's a nation of two tiers, the unvaccinated and vaccinated, you're less safe to others, you jeopardize others, and do the right thing. When you say to someone, do the right thing, you actually suggest that if they don't do that right thing, they do something wrong, right? So it's all this sort of little, very smart sort of use of words by people that studied communication and political communication, such as the Prime Minister in New Zealand. So using these words of do the right thing, less safe to others, and then you see people just hating each other in the streets because it just becomes to be. And so when I have discussions with people and they tell me it's nothing to do with the government, don't blame them. But to be honest,
God, they're so brainwashed.
Yeah,
I'd like to employ the marketing, whoever's in control of the marketing campaign for this, because it's
when you only hear these things, and then people sit in front of TV all the time, and that's what they hear. They read the New Zealand Herald, and that's what they see. It penetrates them. And I watched it many times in Israel, unfortunately. In Israel, they assassinated a prime minister in 1995 based on these things, based on years of just kind of keeping people in fear and separation and thinking that someone is wanting to sell them out or whatever that is. So things can be easily escalated, unfortunately. Human behavior is to distinguish stuff you can kind of realize about human behavior. Ease of obedience was always the problem in every era in human history. People just doing their job. Do you know what I mean? I remember the biggest famous trial in Israel was with Adolf Aikman. He was a famous Nazi that Israel caught in Argentina in 1961. They brought him, kidnapped him from Argentina, brought him to Israel to a trial. And so that was the only execution that was in Israel. But Aikman, I remember watching the trials and reading all his statements, was saying that he's not having any regrets of sending Jews to extermination in to be burnt, all the stuff, because he was just following orders. And when you realize doing the right thing, right? So you're doing the right thing, because at the time, Germans thought that they're doing the right thing. So I feel like, and it's not to say that we're going to burn each other here, by the way, so don't jump to conclusion, but the narrative of it is exactly the same. Right? It actually promotes this, and we all know how ease of obedience is and how people just flock to do something because someone told them or whatever that is. The only way for us is to be able to have conversations and allow people, regardless of what choice they make in their life, to still feel that, one, they can be acknowledged by what they say and not being put down, like current agenda of mainstream media in New Zealand. And that's the place that we're going to be at. So, yeah.
I think that's what saddens me is this bullying, is as someone that was bullied as a child and have had bullying issues throughout my whole life in various ways. feeling, and even close friends of mine that, putting things on their Facebook page like, anyone that's not vax, you might as well block me, I'm not your friend anymore.
Oh,
and
it's
crazy. And it's it's worse than religion and racism. It's back to the days of, when they'd put a sign on the wall saying no blacks or no woman, or now no vaccinated. And what just really boggles my mind is us that are not vaccinated and are choosing that because it's our right to choose. I'm very open and understanding of why they're getting it done, and I understand the narrative, and they're doing it for the community and do it, save lives and all that kind of stuff. But they never seem to want to see it from our side, and I feel like that's my experience. And I don't put them down or bully. I'm like, that's cool. And the bottom line is, I think we're all trying to do the right thing. We're all, coming from a place of love, especially those that have got vaccinated, because that's the narrative that's being fed. But it's just incredibly saddening, like seeing friends and family and just the segregation. I mean, I had a girlfriend of mine who's literally just gone and got the vaccine because her parents have a policy that not even family members can come into their house unless they're vaccinated. So to see her own family, she's gone and got it.
That's coercion. It's just outright coercion. And when do people start taking responsibility? Like, you cannot give informed consent, right, Nick? Informed consent must involve no coercion, and therefore it's unethical. And is that legal?
What coercion is again, it's always a grey area, but. And you pointed out an example of why it's such a grey area. When you've got families who are saying you're not welcome to come and visit unless you're vaccinated, you're saying, well, that's coercion. Well, yeah, it kind of is, but it's not coercion in a legal sense, in the sense that that you are being required by law effectively to do something, or to face economic or financial repercussions.
But isn't even the law coercion?
Well, no, but like the concept of informed consent is really, it does have that element to it, that it can't be consent that's offered under pressure, that you either do this or you're going to suffer financially. But it's all a question of degree. And it's all a question of context. So there's no black and white answer to that question. Is where does consent end and coercion begin? Same thing with the informed part. What do you need to be informed of? We're not being informed of the risks. That's obvious.
No, absolutely not.
We know that
we're not allowed to share stories that didn't work that well as well either.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah.
I have a friend in hospital at the moment who, as soon as she had the vaccine, heart palpitations, she's headache, vomiting, etc., and like within hours. And she's like, they're trying to tell me that it's not because of the vaccine. Like they are already trying to cover this up. I can't post about it. Like she's like, I feel so trapped. I can't even. Like, she's trying to move house, and she's got a baby, and she's like, this is, she's bedridden, and she's like, this is like the way that she's being treated, being concerned about her own health. And like they said, oh, you must have bumped your head and eaten something funny for your tummy to be sore. And she's like, no, I nothing's wrong with me. So yeah, it's very, very worrying.
This is the thing I'm seeing. So I used to be an effective neuroscientist, and there is a thing called the cognitive affective bias, and also cognitive dissonance. So cognitive dissonance is when we perceive something that goes against our thoughts and feelings and beliefs and regular behaviors, and it causes this tension. It's a psychological tension, effectively, and and then add to that the cognitive affective bias. So what that says is that your dominant or labile emotions, and if you think about it neurologically, like our brain, when it comes to emotions, literally has like the left and the right side, and one's the positive balanced emotions and the other's the negative side, and that impacts your attention, your perception, your encoding, memory recall. Like part of our experience is our recall of how things made us feel last time. And so, you know, if you're naturally a positive person, you'll walk into two people can walk. I used to give lectures on this. Two people can walk into the same experience, and if one's like predominantly an optimist and one's a pessimist, the optimist will attend to all the what's called mood congruent data in their environment, and they will perceive it as better than it is. They will and that's through the recall of mood congruent memories, and just it's like a vicious cycle towards positivity, but the same is with negativity. And so what we're really seeing here is, you know, like two people can sit and watch the news and they'll have completely different experiences of the same news, and it is based on their belief systems, and we're seeing this kind of driving of so much fear. Add to that media, and I don't know about you guys, but for me, the people that I know, the majority of people who are vaccinated watch the news, don't look up the science. They admit, well, we need them to tell us what the science means, because we don't have the skills ourselves to understand that really technical discourse. And, you know, the media, I mean, this is the kind of cool thing for me, is that I've done 6 years of postgraduate study, 3 years in sciences, 3 and 3 is in the media. And so I like, and part of my sciences is I did pharmacology and toxicology at Auckland Med School back in 2005 with the final year doctors and pharmacists. So not only that I am very familiar with this exact field of science, vaccine production, drug production, and then watching how the media jump on it. And media, I can tell you, you know, drama creates ratings. So more than you know, happy, positive stuff. So that's why you look at the news and you don't see much positive stuff. You see like a whole lot of drama. And so they're driving, I mean, they're feeding off this. They're like fantastic. They've got this fear-based narrative that's going to drive the ratings up. People are scared. They've got to tune into the news every day. When you watch the TV, it puts your brain into your frontal cortex. Alpha brainwaves make you more suggestible. So it's used actually, like effective neuroscience is one of the areas that you look into is subliminal programming. And you know, it's interesting watching this, because we're literally seeing a nation of actually brainwashed people based on what the narrative of the media tells you. And if you are anything but that, no matter how much science you present, it is just, you know, it's just not there. And then looking at the science, and I will say I walked from that industry, because back then the corruption in not just pharmacology with big pharma, but even science, and back to what you said, Isaac, before, is, you know, how do we know, like now we've got scientists that want this and science, you know, that are saying this, and scientists that are saying that. Science is an industry, and it, you know, it's the best thing we have. The scientific method is great, and the best thing that you can do is to go and look through those articles. Unfortunately, however, there is a huge amount of corruption, and you get these big corporations paying the scientists to spit out data, or say, you know, the scientists literally have their hands tied. Otherwise, they lose their job. They can't feed their children. And I think we're seeing a lot of that similar concept, not just with the scientists, but with the, you know, politicians and the media. And it's just this big collective. If you don't go with the status quo in the mainstream narrative, you know, you're absolutely outcast.
And the push just seems too much for me. It's like, why do you know, go and get your free popcorn chicken from KFC when you get your vaccine, or have your $200 voucher? And like, for me, that's where my gut's like, why do you need to push this so much?
And not only that, I ask everyone, you know, have you not wondered why is it they're giving one option? No talk about supplements, no talk about exercise, no talk about reducing stress, no talk about lifestyle management. And by the way, there's actually lots of pharmacotherapies now for COVID. I can tell you the medicines that I'm on for my neuropathy, and what my son is on for his asthma, both effective treatments for COVID. The treatments for COVID is not one drug fixes it all. But, you know, there is there are lots of options for treatments, plus the ivermectin,
Mm.
horse paste, which won a Nobel Prize for human medicine, and phenomenal studies and data, and the media just bullying it, and meanwhile Merck and Pfizer are creating an awfully similar drug right now, protease inhibitor, that will come out no doubt far more expensive and controllable. It's just scary.
It's scary.
So, Nick, what can we do about this? And we're having this conversation particularly on the anniversary of our New Zealand Declaration of Independence, which is all about our sovereignty. So let's talk about that.
Right. So for anyone who's listening who doesn't know about the Declaration of Independence, it was signed 8 years before the Treaty of Waitangi, and it was signed by a group of chiefs, or rangatira, who were declaring independence.
My family member.
Yes, who are declaring independence on behalf of the people of Aotearoa, and that was recognised specifically by King George III, who was the sovereign of the Crown at the time. And what the Declaration of Independence provided was that the chiefs the United Chiefs are able to effectively delegate to who they choose lawmaking powers. So you can see in the Treaty of Waitangi, which followed up, a lot of the same chiefs who signed the Declaration of Independence signed the Treaty of Waitangi also. And the Treaty of Waitangi was intended to be not a fundamental ceding of sovereignty, a ceding of what they had gained through the Declaration of Independence, but instead a revocable agreement to provide governorship powers to the Crown. So the Crown sort of at the time just sort of picked up on that and said, oh, well, we're the sovereign now and we're going to just behave like the sovereign. And in fact, 50 years after the Treaty of Waitangi was signed, when the validity of it became before the courts at the turn of the century said the Treaty of Waitangi is a simple nullity and the Crown is the sovereign authority in New Zealand. There's no other sovereign authority in New Zealand. And that case has since been overruled, and it's become recognised that that's not the case. That the Crown's powers to make laws derives from the Treaty of Waitangi, which in turn derives from the Declaration of Independence. So the Crown's sackable, basically, as the sovereign entity of New Zealand. And all it takes is for the United Tribes to say you're sacked, and to set up an alternate sovereign movement. Unfortunately, from a practical point of view, the United Tribes are generally anything but united.
Nice.
And it's kind of like herding cats. You've got people who are absolutely captured by Crown interests who are doing very nicely. Thank you very much. You've got the complicating factor of iwi groups, which the concept of iwi groups was created by the Crown so that they could make the treaty settlement process more manageable. It was too difficult to deal with all of the individual hapu, who often they were connected, but they might disagree about all sorts of things, and so the Crown said, well, we'll create a new structure, iwi structure, and we'll say this iwi represents all of these hapu, and so when we make an agreement with the iwi, it binds all the hapu, whereas the hapu are saying, well, that's never been the case ever in our history. We owe kind of allegiances to related hapu, but within our rohi, within our place, we are absolutely sovereign here. And we if you wanted to come here and tell us what to do, we'd cut your head off and stick it on a stick, so.
Yeah. Chuck you on the hangi.
Yeah.
so that there is this kind of unique potential in New Zealand for the United Tribes to effectively reunite and create a new sovereign movement. But there's been a lot of attempts to do that. I mean, the Kingitanga movement was part of that, right? When the Kingitanga, the Tainui and the Central North Island tribes that created the Kingitanga movement, that grew out of the Declaration of Independence, but it was kind of localized. It wasn't ever recognized that, you know, there's a king of all hapu. You know, it's a king of, you know, a particular group of hapu, or the queen, or however it's the king at the moment. But so there have been a number of attempts, and you showed me one. You sent me a website of another, probably just one person or maybe a bunch of people who are trying to use the Declaration of Independence to declare sovereignty and say we are now the sovereign. But it takes, I think what it's going to take is a wide scale recognition, or at least a majority recognition throughout all of the hapu in New Zealand, that there is another source of sovereign power. And I think the answer to that has got to be a series of hui around the country to inform people what that means in practice. Because if you can if you can create a new sovereign basis, what we can do is get ourselves free from the colonial monetary system, which hinders and controls absolutely everything. You know, a lot of what Issac was saying underlying that is watch where the money's going, because where the money's going, you've got corruption. When you've got a government that is fundamentally driven by money, it's going to be corrupt. It's inevitable. People are going to be paid off. People are going to be looking after their own interests. And so I've been saying for a long time, we need a constitution in this country and a constitutional currency, which isn't based upon profits. It's based upon, you know, fundamental human and environmental well-beings, concepts like manaakitanga, concepts like kaitiakitanga that should underlie our fundamental laws. And it really starts with the monetary system.
She read my mind.
Sorry, people are probably going to wonder what those words mean. Manaakitanga is relating to hospitality and care, nurturing and caring.
Well, caring for each other, nurturing for each other, looking after each other. Kaitiakitanga, stewardship of the land, looking after the land.
Guardians, guardians.
Yeah, that's it. So I mean, we've got this
conversation.
Yeah. So we do have these fabulous cultural concepts, which are perfect constitutional concepts to adopt in New Zealand. And for me, the hope for New Zealand moving forward is that we actually do recognise that we've never had a constitutional discussion in this country. We've never actually decided what kind of country do we want to be aspirationally. We've kind of just gone by default to, well, we're governed by, you know, initially rogues and liars and profiteers who basically just became a little bit more sophisticated over time, but still essentially the same interests drive us and make our laws and create our society. You know, fundamentally, New Zealanders are peaceful, loving people who love the idea of being united, but unfortunately, we're all united under principles that are anything but humanitarian. They're still run by profiteers, and until we kick them out and decide to restart, we always will be. But the time is nigh. I mean, I really do think that people are open to a discussion about what principles we should be living under as a society. And the question of why don't we have a constitution is becoming a louder and louder one. So yeah, that's where all of that thinking takes us down. So you know, we can do things. We can do constitutional reform without using the Declaration of Independence, but it's there. It's such a tempting, low-hanging fruit for the recognition that the Crown is not absolute. The Crown is sackable. You know. We should all
I guess anything is sackable. anything in our imaginary concept is suckable, because one, it's imaginary, and the only reason why it's valid is because people believe in that, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Really.
The water stream is real because you
Not
can see
touching
the
it.
water, you can drink it, you can touch it. Money and all these things, culture, religion, they're all beautiful imaginary concepts that our minds that are brilliant can create. And therefore, people believe in that. Facebook is nothing if no one is going to use it, right? But we give that power. The crown is absolutely nothing if we say, no, it's no longer the case. The money as we know it could be nothing. Just as a side note of that, we had a conversation, Sadra, my colleague at Earthbeat, with a couple of people that are specialized in cryptocurrency. And we were toying with the idea in creating a currency in which the foundation of it is the systems of the planet, the organic system in which take place, and also the birthright of every human being to have the basic needs, the love and acknowledgement from one another, as we talked as well, and allow people to have basic needs met so we can be moving from the enslavement of a system that basically controls everyone. And the funny thing is, the ones that actually, the way money is at the moment, it started somewhere in England around the big fire of London. I don't know if you're familiar with this event in London back in the 17th century.
1666.
16th, yes. It was a profound event that changed. Yeah.
We'll take your word on that.
So I feel like, well, obviously we don't know exactly what's happened, but few people thought at the time, let's create something and everyone is going to work with it. And they did. And everyone is actually working with it. Hence why we have, banking is private. And there is people that control it for their like. And so thank God for two things. One, blockchain technology that allows us to see that we can actually decentralize systems.
Yep.
Second, thanks to COVID and the pandemic, we realize now people are asking, what else is there? Is it the best life in which I can live? And those questions now are becoming more and more in people's minds. And I'm excited about it. If anything, is the best time to be alive, regardless of all the things. Yeah. So if anything, in times of fear and separation and segregation and problem, that is the best time to create a change. Because when people are complacent and everything is fine, making a change is really hard. But when there is something already crap and going on, then the change is the best time to make it. So I feel really excited, if anything, about it. And I'm excited about the people like yourselves and other people in our community and worldwide that are really kind of in not only the conversation phase, but in ideas in which we are implementing now. And as every idea, if it's implemented and it's going to be valued by some people, that's going to be a great start, because I love the rule of the 3.5%, which is a rule that along the history in any event that you can point, any revolution, any renaissance, whatever that is, you only need to have minimum 3% of your population to disagree about some government agenda, ruler agenda, dictator agenda, and to withstand exactly that and to make something different happen. So sometimes we feel, well, we need everyone to do something or whatever. No, you don't. You only need something to start. And then when everyone else would see, oh my God, that actually is a bit better for me and my kids, I'm keen to try it out. That's what I'm relying on. We don't really need all the 5 million to agree upon something. We only need about 100,000 people to do something. And believe me, we have a lot more than that. So all these value that we give to imaginary concepts, we're going to create different things that are going to be so tangible for people to realize that they can actually have better life for their children. And I'd like to believe that humans really want to see a better future for their children. Most parents are like that. I hope so. I feel it's a great time to be around and to be really going deeper beyond this vaccine, not vaccine, and this and that. In fact, the system wants you to be busy in this, really, because it just allows them to continue with the lies and deceit and enslavement. So that's fine. You can still engage with it, but at the same time, realize what an amazing opportunity we have to create now something that is going to be shaping the future of the next generations. And I've got no doubt that in 50 years, the life on Earth are going to be completely different than what you know now. How it's going to be, I have no idea, but you know, there is many
turning point, one way or another.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the point you brought up, to put that positive spin on it, because for me personally as well, like I love that this is challenging my brain and forcing us to diversify, because we can't, as musicians, we now can't go and perform.
Unemployed.
Like, we're literally unemployed, and I was saying to a friend the other day, I was like, this is actually really exciting. I mean, for me, for example, I've now moved in with Aston, and I'm playing instruments. Like I'm learning to play like double bass and normal bass and drums and things that I would never push myself to do, because I was safe and comfortable just being a singer.
And if it weren't for lockdown, you wouldn't be here.
And if it wasn't for lockdown, I wouldn't be here learning how to loop and doing all these different things. And I have a girlfriend who, for the 10 years that I've known her, she's like, oh, I really want to get back into my art. And I've been like, go and do it. Push yourself. And the last 8, and she's never done, her narrative is, you know, I'm not good enough and doesn't believe in herself, etc., etc. But she was locked down by herself for 9 weeks, and she has made the most incredible art. And I was like, wow, look at what a beautiful thing that has come out of this, and a possible new career for her, because she's also a makeup artist and a hairdresser, and so her career is in question. And I was like, actually, this is really beautiful. Like, let's look at the positive side of this and what's going to push people and challenge them. And yeah, I think it's exciting, because it's just going to force us to do different things.
Absolutely. And I think I keep saying to, you know, our friends as the time went on, and we're like, well, to be honest, life's getting really technological, but how many of us actually have this inherent drive to want to go back to the basics and be with nature and be with each other and live in community, and live the simple life. And it's definitely giving us the space to go towards that. And I have to say, you know, I lose out on the gym. I mean, I lose out on going to all the gigs, obviously, and running the events. But aside from the work side of it, I really just lose the gym and the hairdresser, because I never really went out to bars and clubs outside of the performances. I was only going for work. So, you know, putting into perspective, it's not that bad. It's just frustrating. And, you know, I don't like, though, being called like a second-rate citizen, because I'm choosing not to take a vaccine to protect my medical condition from getting any worse, because I'm able to read the science and I can see that it's really not good. And I'm I mean, and I have to say, I'm also a little bit, I don't know, I contemplate whether I'm being a little bit sadistic in times, going, well, I'm looking forward to seeing, since everyone is so excited and so signed up for this vaccine, you know, I'm looking curious to see what the effects are of turning off those toll-like receptors and rewiring the immune system, what that's going to have on the people. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting times. I feel like the science is going to, and the medicine and people's reactions are going to build up, and so slowly people will kind of, you know, the narrative will fall apart, and they'll.
And I think go back to what you said earlier, Isaac, is I think Jacinda, with her ego and maybe getting a bit powerful, I think she's underestimated how much people love her, and that those, actually, I have a lot of friends who are now vaccinated who are like, but I really don't agree with the fact that they're forcing you to do it, you know, this whole pro-choice thing, and that, you know, it might backfire. The one thing she thought would, you know, everyone loves her and we're all just going to just do what she says, is not necessarily going to happen. Well, we hope not. But also going back to sort of the positive thing, what I've also loved is this contra society, which I've always liked to live in, is now I'll, you know, call up my friend and be like, can you cut my hair, and I'll give you a massage. I'll give you a massage. That's actually quite a comment, you know, and if you do this, I'll do that. and this exchange of services and an exchange of talents, and so there's no money that's exchanging hands. It's the value system of which is so community based, which I'm enjoying.
That's a good segue into, let's talk about Manaaki donors and another alternative way forward, because was it 2019 when we were doing Earthbeat 2019, or was it or was it last year, Nick, that the conversation came up with the time stamping and Manaaki dollars and looking at this alternative currency that wasn't necessarily a trade and exchange of just pure money, but could be other kind of energies.
Guys, just before you carry on, I need to shoot off to another meeting in 10 minutes online, and I might take myself 10 minutes just to break. But I really enjoyed it. So let's carry on doing stuff and share some ideas and thoughts and actions. And I'm actually really keen to talk about these Manaaki dollars.
My ears were pricking up when you were talking about your conversation with Sadra, because we're definitely very interested in this and bringing it in through time banking as well. And we've got a very simple currency concept, which I think could be very, very powerful.
I'd be very keen to actually engage in this conversation, so I'll listen to the recording after. But really, you take the anti-vax and the pro-vax, take the Jews, the Arabs, the Palestinian, the Israeli, the Aussie, the Kiwi. Do you know what's the underlying foundation for everyone? Is the stress of getting by. Is to be able to feed themselves, is to be able to work $1 and pay the imaginary mortgage. So really, that is the point of contact in which everyone is related upon. The biggest fear of people in life is not to be able to have money. And so that is what we're going to change. So after that, you can build blocks of whatever they can look like. And then you can disseminate all these sort of vaccine, schmecks, and all these things that people busy with. But really, if you go deeper, that is the first thing we need to adopt, something new to allow people to breathe again and not to be dependent on something that shows them the stick or the carrot whenever they feel like it, basically. But Nick, I'm eager to hear you when I'm going to listen to it. So lots of love, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us.
See you tonight.
So a really interesting place, I think, to start this conversation about currency is something that a lot of people probably don't know about, which is that the dominant form of currency for exchange in a lot of parts of Africa now is actually Vodafone phone credits. Because in a lot of places in Africa, the national currencies become unstable and were subject to high rates of inflation, and people weren't able to rely on the currency. And so they started doing transactions by exchanging phone credits, because Vodafone had set up a system where it was very easy to transfer your credits to someone else. So people started using phone credits instead of money to do transactions. And there are places in Africa where 90% of P2P transactions between people are now done through this means of exchange. Now, that sort of highlights that there's actually a real vacuum and a real potential in place for a very simple system, where you have a blockchain register of who has what in the currency. But when you want to exchange currency with someone, when exchange value for something that someone's done for you or something you bought from them, you do so by generating a QR code which records, which digitalizes the transaction you want to do, and then you send them the QR code. They input the QR code, and the transaction happens on the blockchain. Or if you're face to face, you just scan your phone, and boom, you've just done the payment on the blockchain. So then building from there into this concept of saying, well, what if we had a currency that was just based upon hours, or minutes and hours, so that when you and this is what time banking is based upon, when you give someone an hour of your time or an hour of your skills, they give you an hour's time credit, for example, using this QR code system, and then you can spend that however you like on someone else's time. Or if you build up the collective, if you like, You can start using that time to buy goods from people who are selling goods within the system, and you're taking the advantage of what businesses do all of the time. Like, I mean, there are lots of businesses that are involved in credit collectives where you've got businesses that are supplying goods to another business who's supplying goods to another business who might be supplying goods and services to the first business, say. So rather than I'm going to buy this off you and you're going to buy them off that and you're going to buy off us, why don't we just do a rolling credit situation where I accept credit for the goods that I get there, and I can use that credit over here to buy my raw materials. And so I'm never using money. I'm never paying tax on these in my supply chain. And that makes everything much more efficient because no one's paying tax on what's going on. So that's where the concept of the monarchy dollar lies, where you've got a central sovereign bank, in essence, which issues currency for people who are doing works for the collective. Yeah, so people who are, for example, growing potatoes. People who are growing potatoes are paid for their time in growing potatoes in monarchy dollars. Then those potatoes are sold for monarchy dollars to the collective. And if you're growing potatoes, you can use the credits that you have for growing potatoes to get carrots and milk and flour and all of the other things that are being generated within the collective, or to get, or for petrol, or to pay whatever it is, electricity. The broader you can make it, the more it looks like it's money, but it's money that's being exchanged just purely P2P all the time, just person to person. You don't need a centralized control system. You don't need tax because you can actually effectively say, provided you're prepared to work 10 hours a week or whatever it takes. And most of the estimates from people who are looking at a big enough collective say 10 hours is actually well and truly sufficient to get everything that you need from the collective, to get to pay for your shelter, to pay for your basic foodstuffs, to pay for all of the goods and services that you need just to live. So for me, that sounds like an ideal point from an economy to start from, that if you've got a skill, anything that you can offer that for 10 hours a week that gets you everything you need to survive, then everything after that is your time to focus upon the things that are meaningful and joyful for you, and that's where you get all the value add. You get artists who have time to make art, and musicians who have all the time
to make music.
As opposed to like 9 to 5 slavery.
Oh, exactly.
Exactly.
I have a quick question around the because I've heard of this whole concept before, and I've always liked it, around the time banking. And there was a question that I've always had in the sense that, so for example, let's say a cleaner gets $30 an hour and is doing an exchange with a massage therapist who charges $100 an hour. So you might get an hour each. How in the time banking, is it just going to be everyone's services of the exact same value, or do you know what I'm trying to say, like in the sense that, or most
time banks operate on that basis?
Yeah,
right. Most time banks operate on an hour is an hour, and everyone's just time is the same.
What about
though? But having said that, just let me finish the point though. Yeah. There's no reason why in a monarchy dollar kind of situation that you can't set whatever price you want for the skills that you have to offer. So if you've got rare skills, if you're the best at something, right? If you're a doctor, or if you're a mechanic who has a very specific skill set that took a long time to develop, you can say the cost for my hour is this.
There's 3 hours to your 1 hour type thing.
You can set.
we talk about a similar thing with the entertainment, because you know we're now business partners and we've come to this from very different avenues. I've done $75,000 worth of tertiary education, and invested a lot of, you know, just done a lot of training and equipment and stuff, and that is significantly of greater value in both time and money as Gemma, who's coming in the same area, but she's come through working her way through and doesn't have that whopping student loan to pay. And so I'm typically terrible at charging extra for myself, but I keep saying it's like, well, it's kind of not fair that for us to do this, which requires me having done all this other stuff that cost a lot of money and took many, many years, to be getting the same rate as someone that's gone to and not done anywhere near the amount of time in 10 years at you know, academic study, and what time she has done, you've been getting paid for it, you know what I mean? It's like, so that's where I do think that there should be, it's not to say that any human is any more valuable than the other. I think everyone is very fair, but I think, you know, when depending on what your skill set is, there are occasions where actually, you know, I do think that some people do need to pay off their student loans and be, you know, you go and do the university degrees because you're going to get paid more, for example.
Look, sure, and those are valid points, and there are also points that encourage people to do further study and to become experts. Without those motivations, we might see whole areas of expertise dropping out because people go, well, you know, it's much easier
to work, you know, and not do all the training.
And I can go down to the old folks home and read books to someone who doesn't even pay attention to me for 2 hours and do the, you know, whatever, you know, I don't need any skills to do that. And it is an issue that I have with the kind of underlying concept of time banking, but time banking in that sense has a different purpose anyway. It has the sole purpose of community building. They encourage people not to use their main professional skill as a time sharing skill.
Yeah.
Right. They say no. Yeah.
Sorry, Karen.
So that's got a particular purpose and it's got value when you're trying to draw just a community together to share more, to connect more. When you're looking at
that word value is what I was going to touch on is because sometimes the value of, you know, let's use that massage cleaner thing again. You know, I could be completely debilitated and can't clean my house.
It's more likely to be me.
Oh, well, yeah. And so that value of that cleaner coming in and you know, doing that.
Can't use my hands and legs. There are days that I literally cannot use my hands and legs all at the same time. I'm lying in bed like a cripple.
And I become the cleaner.
And she's like, oh my gosh, I feel so sorry for you. And I'm like, ah!
Oh, I do feel for her.
Yeah.
But their value around like someone like, you know, in that situation, we're like, okay, well, actually the value of you coming in and cleaning my house for 1 hour, whether it used to be worth $30 or whatever, is so valuable to me because I can't do that myself. And the exchange I can give that person back might be social media marketing or something, because that person can't do it. So I guess it would come down to, from my understanding, it would be that conversation with that person, like, and it might be like, hey, I feel like my skills are worth 2 hours to your 1 hour, or it could be actually I think the value is 1 for 1, because the fact that you've driven all the way here and you've cleaned my house or whatever it might be, it would probably just come down to the people, right? And the discussion.
I think inherently, as long as we all stand that we are equal, you know, at the base, like some people might have done more, and that behavior and that time would be what's requiring any difference. But it's not to say that person is any more valuable than the other person. It's just merely you know, the resources and time that have been needed to get them to where they are.
Look, I mean, I have no problem with a meritocracy based kind of capitalism element to a financial system. In fact, I think it's actually really vital and really helpful. I think what we need to avoid in the development of a new financial system is much more, number one, privatizing or having private control over the means of production, so that you've got people who can control certain vital things and charge outrageous prices for them, and basically leading to the next point, you got to avoid too much power being able to be collated. You have to set limits on how much currency someone's entitled to have before it starts. And it's easy to do.
For the greed
it's easy to set those kind of limits. You can say, you can't bank this money. If you haven't used it, if you're not spending it back into the economy, then it's gonna disappear. It's gonna expire.
Yeah.
So
it's the paying forward, isn't it? It's the
everything that you earn, you have to spend out, right? No matter what.
There's the energy of holding on to it is negative, right? So that paying it forward or giving the time to someone else is the exchange, and then
exactly.
There's enough for everyone. It's that shift in mindset.
Capitalism works on the basis of artificial scarcity. When we were touching on this before, the only reason why people can become absolutely rich, and the only reason why we have significant exploitation, is because people are frightened of not having enough. We don't have abundances. We have, in fact, scarcities, but we don't need them because we've got more than enough for everyone if we have systems to make sure everyone has enough to have. It's all of our scarcities in our society. They're all engineered. They're all we waste incredible amounts of food because if we didn't, it'd drive the prices down, and the growers and the retailers wouldn't get enough. So it's better for the growers and the retailers if 90% of our fruit rots on the ground, right? It's not better for the people, but it's better for the system.
For them,
so that tells me that system's broken, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that 10 hours thing you were talking about, I like the idea of that, in the sense that taking it back to the lockdowns. One thing I think the conversations I had last year was everyone realized how much they didn't really need. Like I realized that, I don't need to buy, go online shopping and buy this crap and that crap from Wish and wherever the hell else. And it came down to it. I was like, I just need a roof over my head and some food. And
I'm enjoying how much we're not spending
on
petrol.
Being very, very minimal. And I think a lot of people I've spoken to have realized, actually, we don't need all this.
I have to admit, when I was missing lockdown, I was like, I felt at the start of this last lockdown, I was like, I called it in because I really wanted to not have an excuse to have to go out and really enjoy being at home. Got what I want 72 days later. But I sit there and I think, what?
A good thing.
As soon as lockdown's lifted, my life isn't actually going to change that much. I get to go to the gym, but not anymore. But other than that, and the odd visit out in there, but I feel sorry for the people who their livelihoods, their day-to-day job has been really turned upside down. I'm very grateful that I'm not in there. And actually, on this note, I keep meaning to speak in for this because we've brought it up a number of times, but talking about this greed, breaking news that I saw at ridiculous o'clock this morning after our stream last night is there's just a lot of media reports out at the moment on Pfizer is literally controlling the governments. So I have a feeling that the government, because I will say I'm experiencing a lot of cognitive dissonance regarding our Prime Minister. I actually really like
what does that word mean?
Cognitive dissonance. I explained it before, but it's the psychological tension.
Gotcha.
Because on the one part, I look at her and okay, we're going to track before COVID, and I think, oh, what a nice personality. She smiles. She's empathetic. She's just I liked that it was a mother, a new mother coming into office and things, and now I just now
it's like wolf and sheep's clothing.
Yeah, I sit there and I wake every morning going, but like it's hard to not like her, and I don't like what she's doing. I don't take it personally, but I sit there and I question is like, surely someone like that has got to have her hands tied. Like I cannot imagine that you can convey all that empathy and be such a passive aggressive dictator. But and and not care. Like, surely our government's got over their hands tied. And since we're seeing that Brazil is and India is reporting on it, and what they're basically saying is that Pfizer's now saying, no, you can't on sell, you can't do this, you can't talk about this, and you can't relay this, and or we're not going to let you have your vaccines. You know, and it's an absolute monopoly. So I do question whether that is what's behind all this, because, you know, when you just take all the politics aside and just look at their personalities, none of that government, they're all actually quite genuinely nice people. But it's just gone so horrifically wrong. And you're looking at it and going, how can people that behave like that or have that personality end up like that? They must truly believe in what they're doing is right.
Yeah, look, it's cognitive dissonance for them too. For them, it operates like, okay, we've got a narrative that works, and we've committed to this narrative. And so once they're committed to the narrative, and all of their decision making is seen through the filter of that narrative, they can't accept the validity of anything which is contrary to that narrative. You know, they automatically discount it and go, well, that can't be true. So I'm hearing it, and they're in echo chambers as well, right? Absolutely, total echo chambers. They're being told by their officials, it's this, this, and this, and stay focused on the narrative. We've got to keep it simple. We're winning with this narrative, and so they don't have perspective. They're trapped by their own sense of story. So, you know,
is there any way that we can get access to the affidavit? Like, is that court case that's going on at the moment? Is that public material? Because I know Sue Gray wrote in a letter, it's that Ashley Bloomfield swore in his affidavit that this is actually more reputational and a financial thing than a health crisis.
My own doctor said it was in an email. I believe this is a political agenda, not a medical one.
Sure.
My doctor's completely flipped. My doctor in June was like, nope, don't take any. And now the other day, she was just like, I can't give you an exemption. She gave me all the instructions of how I could go about getting it through higher powers than her. But, you know, just a complete turnaround, and without actually telling me, you should go get the injection. She was like, well, you can't survive in society without it now. You won't be able to do this without it. You won't be able to do that without it. And I'm going,
narrative,
and it's like, well, okay, I'm prepared to give that up for my health, quite frankly. But, you know, how can you in your ethical right mind, you know, recommend that I take something that produces the exact things that I'm suffering from right now without even having the vaccine? Like, and I can't afford for it to get any worse. Like, and if it gets worse, guess what? The governments are going to be paying for a carer for my son because I won't be able to care for him, someone to drive me around because I won't be able to drive. Like, it's going to cost the taxpayer thousands and thousands of dollars per year just to pay for me for the stupid vaccine, because my already degenerating nerves may very well react even, you know, and go worse, because lots of people are getting that reaction all around the world from this, you know, and we've had a safety signal for Guillain-Barré, which I had aggressively, and I think I've got a chronic lifelong version. So it's
interesting because the narrative that I'm hearing from some friends is, but you're being selfish because you're going to put pressure on the medical system. It's like, well, what if I take it and I get a blood clot, or you know, I might get how I'm then going to go put pressure on the health system. It's the same narrative. So, but they won't accept that argument. Some do, and I'm the same. I mean, I don't have a current neurological condition, but I had the Guillain-Barré syndrome.
You're the 80% that recovered. I'm the 15% that didn't.
And it's a documented symptom that I don't want to risk having that again. It almost killed me. And I could end up being debilitated and not be able to do the things that I want to do. And why can't I just go, no, cool, you know, it's my choice. And I want to wait a bit longer.
Why is it
my mind.
Not okay to say, I'd rather wait till the safety trials finish, thanks, you know, till it's no longer an experiment and it passes, you know, full approval. Like, why is that such an issue these days?
I don't think it's going to stay an issue for that long. I don't think it's going to stay an issue for that long. They're trying to get to this kind of fictional 90% figure, and the big pressure's on. And I think once they get there and they say we're living with COVID now, I think you'll see the narrative change, and I don't think they'll be. I think it'll quietly change by itself. They just will stop pushing it.
They won't be admittance. It'll just
the imperative's gone. The politics has changed.
Mind you, we're going to go through the booster rounds, though.
Changed. So
the boosters, like America's onto their fourth round of boosters, and Israel's already passed their fourth round of boosters. It's just going to be booster after booster. Thankfully not.
Have any other virus in history had this kind of booster thing?
Oh no, you do get.
I mean, the flu jab every year, but I don't.
This is the thing. If you look actually at
vaccine, it's such a great vaccine. Why do you need boosters?
It's not. It's and we've never injected. Okay, we've never injected humans with a messenger RNA vaccine before. It's new technology. Why now is not the time in a pandemic to bring out new technology? New technology of all the technology needs the full safety trials. Bring out the old school ones. So I actually went to the doctor back in June saying, actually, I really don't feel right about the messenger RNA ones. I'd actually rather risk blood clots, to be honest, because the Janssen's was available at the time then as well. And you're literally weighing up blood clots, stroke, neuropathy. It's like, oh, I'll take that one, thanks. But thankfully she told me not to back then, and now she seems to have changed her mind with her hands tied. And
well, my doctor said, because I asked for an exemption, and it was interesting that I had a good 30-minute conversation with her, and the various things that she said, it felt very hand tied. So she said, no, Gemma, I can't give you an exemption for this, but I can give you an exemption for any other vaccine on the market. And I was like, that felt like it was her way of saying, just so you know, like, like
I love that. My doctor's like, only 100 people, only 100 people are able to get the exemption. It's like,
out of 5
how
million?
the hell can you tell that? Especially since the thing that you're saying, the way you're saying is they need to actually take the injection first and then suffer the side effects, and then go, oh, can't
you
get
have
another
to have
one.
my doctor said, if you have to have anaphylactic symptoms to the first vaccine before they will issue you an exemption. And I looked up anaphylactic symptoms, and
which
it's
is
like
nearly die,
vomiting, diarrhea, like headaches,
which is weird because it doesn't
heart palpitations. I'm like, I don't want to risk that.
It doesn't say. This is the thing: is it doesn't even say that though in the vaccine amendment bill. It says you just need written. You need written exemption by a suitably qualified health practitioner, and by, for the first so many months, by the clause 7A of the vaccine amendment bill, it was basically saying that if I was an MIQ worker, I'd still be able to work in MIQ if there was if I was granted medical exemption in writing by a suitably qualified health practitioner. It doesn't even have to say be doctor or specialist. Now it's all changed. But did you read anything about that changing on Friday? Sue Gray's been talking about it changing now.
No, I haven't followed that.
Yeah, we need to look at that.
Send me something. Yeah, and on that question you asked before, I'm sure Sue would be open to sending you copies of affidavits and things. They won't be sealed court documents or anything like that. You won't be able. It'd be difficult to get them from the court. Always is, unless you're a party. But I'm sure Sue Gray will be very open to putting them in a Dropbox and making.
So she's entitled to.
Anyone.
So it is. Like, if it goes through court, it is actually public material. The lawyers are entitled to share it. Is that how?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's their clients' material, I guess you could argue, but I mean, people who bring these proceedings aren't bringing them to keep them secret, are they? They're bringing them to make public. So they will want to see it exposed as much as they can, right? So so I'm sure it won't be that hard to get copies of that stuff. I can have a go. I don't know anyone who knows Sue Gray, but
I've signed up to a party, and I've also messaged her, about saying, hey, I'm really keen to be a part of the next court case. Boy, am I looking forward to that.
Hopefully we can interview that.
Anyway, guys,
it's been a great discussion.
Yeah, it has been. And look, I'd really like to come and visit sometime, and have a jam and hang out and.
Oh yeah, he's a great pianist.
Oh,
jazz
awesome!
Pianist.
Love that.
just decided I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore, and I just gave up. So
I know that because and I don't blame you. Why would you want to live a life of immense stress all the time if you don't need to? If you decide that actually I'm ready for something else.
Why would I want to be a pillar of an edifice that I believe needs to come down?
100%. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your knowledge and everything. It's been wonderful.
And sorry we couldn't broadcast this. We'll have to do a post thing. And in which
we'll
case,
just have to get you back another time.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll see. It's nice talking about it. It's quite cathartic.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's good because I mean, yeah. There's not many people I can talk about it. I've got a bunch of friends who have similar views, but my two girlfriends, neither of them want to talk about it. Get it.
You're one of them.
I really want to. No, not even that. It's just like I don't even want to think about it.
I get those days, and it was funny enough because I don't watch the stand-ups, and then it was the other day something impulsed me to watch the stand-up, and because I can't stand how there's no opposition in the media. They're all just like gushing. And not only that, the way they frame the questions is just so hateful and distasteful. And already just by listening to the question, you're already biased to.
Yeah, I know the language.
It's disgusting. Like the media should be ashamed. I hope karma bites all these people in the butt. And maybe their toll-like receptor suppression will do the job for us. But yeah, and then within 5 minutes it was like she was like, and now if you're in events and hospitality you need to be vaccinated, and I was like, all right, switching back off again. It's really burst my bubble. I much prefer a happy news-free world full of entertainment.
Yeah, well, there's plenty out there, isn't there? So I mean, that's the one good thing about the world.
Wow, we've come to the end of our show. A massive thank you to Nick and to Issac. I've learnt so much. Thank you for your knowledge and thank you for your time. It's very much appreciated.
We hope you've enjoyed the conversation, and if you're interested in coming and chatting with us on this show, we'd love to hear from you. You don't need to be an expert. We're particularly interested in hearing from people that have had injuries from the vaccine, because we believe they are being silenced, and we would like to offer you a voice. We're also interested in hearing from the media, any whistleblowers, anyone concerned.
Just anyone, people that have been vaccinated, not vaccinated, if you're being affected by these mandates, if actually maybe even your business is booming because of this. Anyone's welcome to come on here. We would love to chat to you. So please get in touch with us. Please watch us again. And as we mentioned, we are musicians. So outside of this talk show, if you would like to join us to have some fun and laughter and playfulness and raise this vibration with the frequency of love, which is music, we'd love for you to join us on our Twitch channel.
So we hope you've enjoyed exploring what the COVID is going on. We'll see you next time.